This was funding your business Q&A workshop. We have, welcome. You and I doing me a favor and just checking your name off this list here. We have Joe Powers from the Main Venture Fund and Julie Viola of Warren Savings Bank. Both of them specialize in helping small businesses get funding and can help you with your questions today. And with that, I will hand it over. If you guys wouldn't mind giving just a brief introduction.
Sure. Good afternoon, welcome everybody. I'm glad to see you here in person, but also online. My next from the sun. My name is Julie Viola. I'm a commercial lender at Warren Savings Bank. I run a small business banking group. I'm a Portland native. I've lived in the city all my life, away from a while, Portland high school graduate. My office is just a couple of blocks this way. And small business lending is what I do every day. And gosh, I can't think of how long I've been working still on this particular class. Joe and I have been doing it together for a number of years as well. But really being prepared to help you understand access to capital, questions around it, and then just kind of navigating some of the great resources we have locally. Being an entrepreneur in this community, there's some really good resources, and we'd like to talk about those as well.
And for my part, my name is Joe, as Dan mentioned, and as we were talking about, I think some of you were online, perhaps heard this, certainly people in the room heard it, but there is some company materials that we're not going to step through page by page, but it's there at the SCORE website, or you can get it by emailing SCORE if you'd like. So we're going to sort of have more of a Q&A format for this than a webinar format. My personal background is in equity finance, so it's a certain type of capital that we can talk more about, but it's different than what Julie does in her day job with debt primarily. It's there's so in addition to just generally talking about how do you find money as a business, we'll talk about different types of money, debt and equity being two of those types. How's the audio for the folks online? I recognize we're right next to a whirring projector, so it might not be, okay, we got a thumbs up. All right, thanks, Davis. All right, so assuming everyone can hear us, maybe a good thing to do is just maybe, Julie, we can sort of set the stage with sort of the four types of capital as we typically talk about them, and then maybe sort of go to Q&A.
Yeah.
All right. You want to start?
So you're closer.
Is it mic?
Yeah,
Yeah.
happy to do that.
Okay, thanks for that. I think unless there's a revolt from online, I think it sounds like it's working okay. But we'll keep.
We start with the debt and bootstrapping maybe, or you want to do?
Maybe let's do grants. Let's do an order. Bootstrapping, maybe then grants.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll take bootstrapping. So again, we typically think about sort of different types of capital depending on the stage of the company that you're at. And I think in this room, generally, there's people that span from, hey, I just got an idea and I'm trying to think about all the aspects of this idea, including where to find money. And sometimes there are people who have been in business for years and they have already raised money, and for them, they might be interested in one particular aspect of it. So we're sort of assuming that's a wide spectrum. And so we talk about everything from sort of that what's appropriate at that idea stage to a more mature company. At the idea stage, most of the time, entrepreneurs start by what's called bootstrapping, which is, I think the term comes from like pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. It's sort of like, it's sort of being scrappy. It's sort of like, what do you have at your immediate disposal to sort of give this idea a test? And it may mean that you can't fully get your business up, but how can you at least test your idea on a small scale that doesn't cost a lot of money and take a lot of time? And so an example of that might be, if I have an idea for a bakery and I want to bootstrap getting this thing up and running, first thing I want to do perhaps is to test whether the muffins that I make, that they're any good, that people want to buy them, that they like them. And also for me to get feedback on how do they taste and, you know, how are they presented and those types of things. So in lieu of me going out and buying a storefront and hiring a team and buying a bunch of bigger kitchen equipment, maybe I'll just take a few dozen things in my, and I can, you know, talk to people, you know, obviously sell the muffins and talk to people about whether they like them or not. Maybe they like different flavors, maybe they like, you know, sort of different, maybe it's not muffins that they like, but they like something else in the bakery. So those are ways in which I haven't spent a lot of time and money, but I'm out there verifying the assumptions that I have in this business. So a very simple example, you can map that onto your own idea. But bootstrapping is usually, the actual funds for bootstrapping is usually what's in my personal savings. Do I have maybe some friends and family who can pitch in if I don't have enough savings for me to do this sort of basic approach? And it's avoiding going out and getting money from some institution. You know, and ideally, and oftentimes people find that, hey, actually, and this is just sometimes a cold hard fact. Oftentimes the business is not what they expected it was going to be, either, you know, their experience doing it or customers' experience, and so they shut it down after a few months of doing this bootstrapping and this testing. And that's okay. You know, failure is more often the rule than not, as you all probably know. And the good part about bootstrapping to figure that failure out versus going to a bank and loan is that there are a lot less repercussions about this crappy way. So that's why bootstrapping is a good thing to start with. But then once you get a little more traction, you might want to think about other types of funding. And the other thing that we talk about are grants and equity, as I mentioned before. So there's those 4 buckets: bootstrapping, grants, debt, and equity. And we'll talk through, Julie will talk through grants and debt.
Yeah, and try to keep it somewhat simple. I think that's probably one of the biggest questions that I get in the role that I have is, where's the free money, or are there grants that are available for me to start my business? And that's probably the thing to sort of understand. The grant is usually something that is money that is awarded to your business or given to your business. And there are repayment terms, meaning if you have a $10,000 grant, there isn't an expectation that you can pay that $10,000. But usually with grant funding, there's some type of strings or some type of maybe matching. So here in the job grant program. So if you're creating jobs, you can apply for a matching grant.
I can now. Amy, do you mind going on mute? I think your speaker's picking up some feedback. Thanks.
Okay, very good. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no.
So, you know, the grant piece is sort of an elusive piece, right? You know, there are people in this world whose profession is grant writing, and you pay them to write them. Typically, what I say in the grant area is that it's usually very specific, whether it's technology, industry, job creation, and there's a limited supply of that. So, you know, we always suggest to folks to, you know, do some searching for grant funding, but it isn't something that you really should be relying on for this, you know, investment in your business, because it is very competitive, and then usually the source of the grant is looking over your shoulder for something, whether it's to achieve certain job creation goals or, you know, getting products to market. So they can be very elusive. Typically, when folks, you know, want to know where all the free money is, we usually say, well, you usually want to investigate your bootstrapping, your debt options, and then, you know, grant funding often comes along as your business is evolving or you're hiring employees or something like that. But that's the biggest difference to sort of understand is that grant is money that's typically, you know, it is typically free money, but there's usually some type of special purpose or some type of match that is attributed with it, but there isn't sort of a repayment on it. And then the next piece is probably the piece that most people are familiar with, it's bank financing. I've been a commercial lender in this market for a very long time. I funded businesses in all stages, from the very infancy to, the medium to the growing to, what I've done a lot of in the last handful of years is people who are selling their businesses, and someone's coming along and, taking out a loan to buy a business instead of start a business. So, traditional bricks and mortar banking, it's not all that different if you're familiar with maybe purchasing a home. There is a tremendous amount of information. You need to file your tax returns, you need to know your personal credit score, and then you'll ask a whole bunch of other questions as it relates to your business. And usually what we say to folks is that, if you're thinking of borrowing money for your business, don't wait until you need it to apply for it. Start those stages early. Find a local bank or a bank that you can talk to that understand the process. Some businesses aren't quite ready for traditional bricks and mortar lending. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to work in a community where there's lots of different kinds of programs, where there's something called the Greater Portland Council of Governments. There's Southern Maine Finance Agency. Here in the city of Portland, there's an economic development arm that actually has small business loans. And then through some of our SBA partnerships, there's something called Community Concepts, and CEI has a program called the Wicked Fast Loan. So there's some other programs that are outside of bank debt, but really understanding debt is something that needs to be repaid. So what any lender is doing is they're looking to see, who are you as the business owner? What is your experience? And then what is the track record, or what is the process with which the lender will get repaid? Do you have a business that's been in business, so we can look at your tax returns and look at your financials and say, looks like your business can afford to repay a loan. Or if your business is growing and starting up, it's really digging into the business plan and your projections and your budgeting to say, okay, I see where you're headed, I understand what this business plan is, but also, does it look like you and your business can afford to repay this loan? And I say this all the time, and I mean it very sincerely. Sometimes it comes out and sounds a little goofy, but lenders don't want to push you into loans that looks like you can't afford. And there are often times when people come in, and Joe used the example of a bakery. There was one that came in a while ago, and they wanted to borrow, over $1 million to start a business and do, all the things associated with it. And say, just crazy to think how much $1 million is, what that monthly payment is. And as you start to kind of walk people through that process, help them understand how many bakery items a day that is that they actually have to sell to make that loan payment. And then they're asking the lender to provide a loan to a business that doesn't have a track record. So, it is a very delicate balance when you're coming to lending to ask for financing. But I've got one of my desks that I'm working on right now. It's getting ready to head off to credit, and unless there's something crazy that we find we go for their personal credit, I'm sure it's something that will get approved, because the business plan, the individuals, process, the projections, it all makes sense and it seems reasonable, as well as the ability to make those payments back to the bank. I'm sure you've got tons of questions that go around that, and instead of spending a lot more time talking about it, we'll field those questions as we go. But just sort of as a side note, what I say to folks is make sure that your financial situation is in order. File your tax returns. Know what your personal credit is. When you're talking about small business lending, regardless of whether you're working with a traditional bank, whether you're looking at Greater Portland Council of Governments or CEI, or even the Finance Authority of Maine does some direct lending for small businesses. Your personal credit is pulled as part of that process. So understanding what your household responsibilities are, what your personal credit is all really, really important. So that is grants, debt at a very high level. Anything else you want to add on that, Joe, before we?
No, there's a equity. So the last is equity. I'll talk a little bit about that, and then before we shift to the Q&A, we'll get a little round of sense of who's in the room, because that'll really help. Julie and I also help a lot of you understand, where questions are coming from among your session peers. So equity is, I think probably the least common type of financing in the ones that we've mentioned. And the reason being is that equity investors are actually buying part ownership of a business. And so it's fairly involved in terms of the sort of understanding of how exactly I, as an equity investor, I'm going to share decision-making with you now as now I'm part owner of the business. So I'm joining the board of directors of your business, and we're thinking about a lot of the high-level decisions together. And it also assumes that equity investors are looking for a return on their investment, just like banks. But for us, it's not a monthly payment. The benefit to the business is I can take the money in up front, and then I don't have to pay it back for many years. But ultimately, I do have to pay it back with a return. And what the equity investor is expecting is that the investor and the company are going to work together and grow the value of the business as fast as possible, and then sell the business in 5 to 7 years to a buyer who's going to put more capital in and take it to the next level. So that obviously is not something that most business owners want to do. You know, they want to own business for a longer period of time. They don't want the influence of someone else telling them, you know, what to do or helping make decisions. And that's totally fine. So it tends to be a lot of technology companies. So when you hear about, like, you know, people see Shark Tank on TV and they think equity investment, that's sort of an angel investor. It's sort of a dramatized version of what equity is. It's not usually that I would say dramatic, but that's an example of it. And, you know, companies like Facebook and Google, a lot of those took equity in their early stages and set up a board of directors and some of those more formal sort of controls. But again, you know, for your average Main Street business, certainly for a bakery, it probably doesn't make sense to take equity. And certainly you might have investors who own a portion of your business, but that's not, in general, when you think of equity investors, you think of you know, investors that are venture capital funds and they're putting in millions of dollars to try to grow these companies really aggressively. So I'll stop there, other than to say, you know, we can certainly talk more about it if you want to delve into it. But typically in these sessions, we spend the most time around grants and debt. And at the end of the session and work, you know, at any point on the SCORE website, as part of the materials, we have a comprehensive list of, you know, where can I find grants, which debt options are there in the state of Maine that I should be looking at. So there is sort of a menu that you can look through, depending, as Julie said, depending on your type of business. Obviously, everyone's got a little bit of a different approach, but we have that resource list. Anything else to add before we do a little round the horn? Okay. Why don't we go around, and just in the interest of time, and you say your name and the business that you're working on, and if you can, try to sum it up into one sentence. That tends to be a challenge, but it's a good practice. So let's do that, and then we can do the room first, and then we can turn it over to online. And by the way, I think there's 2 hours allocated for this. There used to be 1 hour, so we have a little more room, but I don't think we'll do 2. I can't do 2. I've got to leave a little bit earlier, so we'll try to make sure we're done. We shoot for an hour and a half, Julie. So you know, hopefully that works for everyone here too. We'll give you back some time. So do you want to start at the end?
Oh, okay, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Aline Pinto, early stage business owner. I just really have equity business, consulting business, trying to work with healthcare organizations, community health leaders to try to bridge all the different healthcare services and improve healthcare outcomes among underserved populations.
Very nice.
Yes, my name is Dan Desiderio. I have a day job, and I'm looking to branch out and hire a small business person.
What type of business would you have any idea what type of business?
I'm in for the service industries.
Okay,
We'll see.
cool.
We're for the right opportunity.
Yeah, interesting.
My name is Rich Schiller. I own a staffing and recruiting business called Scale U. We primarily focus on placing software engineering individuals, usually with experience in either mobile or AI ML, just like data engineering. We've been in business for a little while now, and we're profitable and everything. Just kind of curious, what the options are, and I'm also new to Maine, so I wanted to come by. I'm new people.
Nice. Where are most of your clients based?
Most of them are in SF.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have a partner on SF. Kind of like, so.
I'm Michael, I'm the administrative manager for SCORE, so I'm here just to make sure things are going well. So they.
Thanks for you.
Hey, Tom Wall, I'm Wall with Oak LLC. We're an online web services and AI company. We basically take your own personal preferences through questionnaires and as a browse and then turn that into insights. So like the stuff that you actually care about a website, like if they're good actors in the community, like things you care about in data privacy, we turn that into just like customized for your house. And I guess I'm just fucking joking. I didn't know he was gonna be here, but yeah, we're at the point we got like 24 people, and we need to start looking at funding. I need to hire that. We need to look at cash.
We already talked about ourselves.
Hi, I'm Helena Sokolow. I don't actually run a business or anything myself. I'm an occupational therapist. And then in that capacity, I help people with their vocational goals, and my knowledge around starting a business is very limited. So I thought it would be a good resource to know what they're doing and help my clients.
Yeah, I'm Justin. I am a product developer. I develop marketing strategies for companies. And I've decided to go on my own and develop an idea for a business myself, and not be involved with being the middleman. I've got a very long list of ideas that I have developed over a couple of years. And I just thought to come here is find out about funding and resources.
Sorry for the late arrival. But my name is James Nestabel. I own Lending Hand Solutions LLC. Right now, I'm a general contractor on paper. What I'm trying to create is a general labor organization. So I have implemented all my DBAs right now. Like I have a lot of experience in the actual workforce, so knowing how to do stuff is one thing, but knowing how to run a business is a whole different aspect. So lately, what I have foreseen for myself is I have DBAs and I have accounts in different sorts of banks. So that way it's a strategic thing for loans that are on life. I plan to develop a corporation. I don't know whether it's going to be a nonprofit or not yet, but it's called Seeds of Hope. So we hope to, one of my buddies' moms runs a charity organization, or is really like high up on one. So I try to write a check every month for charity. And it's pretty much, I'm trying to create a positive environment. What kind of sucks about, you guys got your marketing, you guys got your AI, you guys got your laptops and technology. Some people are more kinetic kind of people. And that's not their fault, and they're surrounded by probably like a negative aspect of life, or just people, like I'm trying to create a positive workforce, because your professional environment is supposed to be your professional release against personal attacks, or just your personal life, but in the general sense, I'm trying to create something bigger than just a business. I'm trying to create an organization. So
Very cool. Thanks. All right, so folks online, to the extent that you're able to take yourself off mute, maybe if you want to start.
Hey folks, my name is Davis. I run Scrap Dogs Community Compost. We're a curbside compost service in Midcoast, Maine and the Kennebec Valley.
Thanks, Davis. How about Amos?
My name is Amos, so I'm from Congo DRC. I have a importing company from the here in US. I importing the food from Congo to Maine. So like smoked fish, some vegetables dry. I working if you Island Lamb is helping me to do some farm if you community cultivating almost 2 years I work if you Island Lamb. So that I do.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. How about Amy?
You're welcome.
And I recognize some people may not be able to come off mute, so.
Yeah.
What about
Also, hello.
About Adam?
Hey folks, Adam McHugh here. My wife May and I started a company called Joy Switch. We're looking to open a indoor recreation bar in town, but ultimately our business model is focused on inclusive recreation, both indoor and outdoor.
Very cool. Thanks, Adam. Amy, do you want to go for it now? I think you're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Amy. I live at Westbrook. I'm only in the early stage of, trying to form my business. So I'm here to learn about to run the business and probably get some funding for my business.
Sounds good. Just learning. Sounds good. All right, Steve. And maybe if Steve can join Tennyson.
Hey everybody, I'm actually in the early stages of looking at opening some sort of car wash facility in the area that I live, because there's no car washes around here.
Excellent. And
hi, my name is Ann Patnode, and I founded and run a 501c3 nonprofit called Prevent Medical Error. I have a pretty extensive background in drug safety involving outsourcing globalization of prescription drug products. And we are, I'm pivoting into trauma-informed health coaching. I'm studying for my master's in health coaching and plan to sit for national certification. And so that will also change income streams because it will diversify revenue. So we have plans to do fee for service. And then also if I could fund it, I would love to start a program for trauma-informed health coaching for first responders and veterans.
great, thanks, Ann. Eric. Eric came off mute, but we can't hear you. All right, make him back. How about Garrett?
Hi everyone, my name is Goret Bishimo. I own a company. It's called Personal Care Agency, where we help people with personal care. And we've been in business for 6 months. And so I'm here to see if I can get some funding or if there is other resources that can help my agency.
Great, thank you. I think that's a wrap. wow, lots of different types of companies in this session. And so you can see there's for-profit, nonprofit, services, products, early stage, profitable businesses. And so there's a mix of different things. I'm remiss because I didn't mention this at the outset, but we usually say this on the other slide, which is SCORE as an organization is a nationwide volunteer mentor network. And so part of what they do is provide these webinars and these sessions, but the majority of what they do is one-on-one mentoring with companies. So if you don't have a mentor, it's a free service to you, and we will cover what we can today. But to the extent that everyone in this room really needs sort of a customized funding plan, that might be something to consider if you don't already have a mentor. So just to put that out.
I think something, Joe, that I noticed, that is just something to think about as you're thinking about funding options. And I always say to folks, how do your customers pay you? That is probably one of the most fundamental questions to understanding funding your business. If you think about various businesses that sort of gave us their quick spiel this afternoon, you probably get paid in very different ways. You may get paid immediately. You engage with the customer and say, we're going to do X, Y, Z. They pay you by check, by cash, maybe by Venmo, maybe that you accept credit cards. So you get paid immediately. There are other businesses that you are service or you are providing information technology. So maybe you have contracts and you receive monthly kind of payments from these contracts. So when I'm talking to small business customers and trying to help them understand the funding landscape, one of the most important things besides saying, hey, do you have a mentor? Have you worked on a plan? Do you have a budget? Do you have some goals financially? Do you know how much it costs to turn the lights on in your business? Do you know how much it costs to turn the lights on at home? Because it's a very delicate balance between your business and your home, and sometimes they're pretty closely related. But the other aspect is to really consider how is it that your customers are paying you. In that home healthcare services, you might be getting paid each week, or you might be getting paid once a month, or as an example, you might have to bill the state of Maine and Medicare, and they might pay you in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, who knows? But in the meantime, you still have rent and payroll and utility bills to pay. So that is a very important question for you to understand as an entrepreneur, but also as someone who's growing a business or starting a business. Because if you have a lag time in terms of when your customer pays you, then having proper working capital is super important. And that's where that bootstrapping comes in. Traditional bank financing is usually something like, you put 10 or 20 or 25% down, or you put your contribution in, and the bank or the lending institution provides sort of that other piece of it, whether it's a line of credit, whether it's a term loan. If you're purchasing a business, you still need to have a down payment. And then you think about, what is that working capital? How do I navigate that first month while I'm scaling or growing, or just because you say, oh, I'm in business, doesn't mean necessarily that there's revenue and money coming in. So, and I see some heads nodding. So it's a very delicate balance, but understanding the other piece that I say in terms of your customer piece is your business seasonal? Are there, kind of peaks and valleys? And a really good one to explain to everyone again is if you're in Portland, if you're on the waterfront and you're a tour and travel business. I mean, your peak season may be from, Memorial Day to Columbus or Indigenous People Weekend. But when it rained in all of June, July, and half of August, there's a whole different funding set that people had to think about and consider. So that's a very important piece that isn't necessarily in the information on the SCORE site, but it's a discussion that I almost always have with business owners when they're thinking about starting, selling, growing, or purchasing a business. Sort of what's in the checking account? How do you get it in a checking account? Some folks, don't process credit cards because they think it's a hassle. But yet for many retailers, as an example, or folks who sell online, if you have that option to have a payment by credit card, not only do you get paid faster, but sometimes your customers spend more money because, again, that's how they interact with their financing. So that's something I always like to put out there as well. besides getting yourself a sport mentor, because I just can't tell you how important that is as well.
Yeah, just to expand on that idea briefly. Yeah, I think a lot of people have the notion that they can generate cash by just starting a business and generate cash sort of organically. And some businesses can do that. And in fact, that's a very good thing to do if you can do it. Meaning, I don't actually need to take on a loan, if I don't need to take in equity. I'm basically gonna bootstrap my whole way through until I get to profitability, meaning I'm bringing in more money than I'm spending on the business, and I can just kind of grow it indefinitely, and I don't have to answer to anyone else. That's great. I think you have all probably found at this point that typically there is some upfront cost, right, in setting up the business. And more times than not, that upfront cost is more than you can just scrape together from your bank account, which is why you're all sitting here, right? Like trying to figure out how do I pay for that upfront cost? And of course, the hope is and the expectation is from anywhere you're going to get capital is that over time, you'll be able to generate some funds, some revenue from your customers, money coming in from your customers, such that you're less reliable on those other sources of capital. And if you're a nonprofit, maybe you actually don't have any revenue coming in the door, in which case you need to make sure that obviously wherever your funding source is coming from, it's coming from consistently and in perpetuity or as long as you want to exist. So obviously it's a different consideration depending on whether you're a for-profit business or a nonprofit business. But perhaps just to turn it over to the group again, for anyone who has raised money, or whether it's successfully gotten a loan from somewhere or successfully had a grant awarded, is there any, maybe do we want to start by sharing a story about that, or maybe something that went wrong in that process where you actually set out to get the loan and you didn't get it? Anything from experiences within the group? Yeah.
I know I'm like a very anomalous person. I never utilized credit ever my whole 20s. I used cash like my whole life. And then when it came down to trying to start a business, my first attempt at a business was doing all right. I actually got like $10,000 per se, and that's after paying again. Kind of had what's the word? Entrepreneurial mental breakdown, I guess you can call it. So then I had to recuperate from that and just whatever. But anyway, credit, I do know credit now kicks you in the ass a little bit if you don't have it. So then I tried doing, and then you learn so much the first time being compliant. There's all those little check marks you gotta make to be a business, and that's the hardest part, I think, personally.
Are you talking about your personal credit, like your credit?
Like my personal, yeah, I've never used credit. I had like a Radio Shack credit card when I was 19, I didn't pick anything out. So you know what I mean? Like, that's right. Sorry. Yeah, I just, that's when I tried just doing the grants thing, and like, that's tough, because you really gotta be like some people need more inspiration in that grant access, or some people need more logistics in that grant access, or some people need more, it's section, so is it towards art, is it towards this, is it towards construction, is it towards this, and then you have to find your grants first, then you gotta write these whole essays for all of them, and then you gotta make sure you have logistics, and some of those grants are based off your projections not being speculation, but speculation is just calculated projection, but whatever. But yeah, at the end of it, right now, all I'm trying to do, I've got my payroll. I'm compliant. I'm registered to the state. I've got workers' comp. I've got retirement comp. So that was my fixation. Is I need my base. I need my platform. I've got all these DBA. I know it sounds weird to open up the DBAs before you even start the company, yada yada. But at the end of the day, it's the plus sign that matters at the end of the year. if we're going into an inflation era, I'd rather have a whole bunch of little businesses that all have plus signs and then have the one LLC and maybe a corporation of some people who believe in me and invest in me or some kind of thing. But I have a big umbrella scenario, and the thing is that it goes to this one spot, so you might as well just have all these little DBAs, you know, one's for cleaning, one's for masonry, one's for landscaping, one's for this, one's for that. And what I'm trying to do is actually recruit like college kids, because it's a seasonal aspect anyway, right? So that would be my major like strategy, would be getting all these 18-year-old college kids to work for almost minimum wage, you know, and then really pay out the people who are gonna be running the shows. I know every single niche that I've opened up, so I can personally train, and when I say we can train that person, we're on the same link. You know, the next thing I gotta really work on is like a human resources handbook and stuff like that. Make one universally for Lending Hand itself, and then make one for each little niche, you know, on paper. And then the only thing I gotta really figure out is how to do like the cash receipts thing, but I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, well, certainly Julie can speak to personal credit. This is an important topic, I think, to talk about, is it touches almost every business. And then also the idea that you shared around how to apply for grants and what that process is like. Maybe we can talk more about that too.
I think it's super important to consider, as a small business owner, I think I said this very early, you know, how you have interacted with your personal credit in the lending sphere is sort of indicative of how your business would interact with credit. So if you don't have good credit, invest the time now to go get a copy of your credit report and get those things cleaned up. If you were to apply for a traditional lender and you're going to use SBA support or Small Business Administration agency guarantee, if you have any debts with the federal government that haven't been cleaned up, whether it's student loans, past due taxes, any of those kinds of things, you have to be in good standing to qualify for those pieces. So I think sometimes, you know, we live in a society where, you know, it's all of this marginality down and here's the monthly payment, or walk into a car dealership and it's all about the monthly payment. And as a business owner or somebody who's trying to grow and scale a business, it's not about the monthly payment. You know, it's about, you know, how much does it cost to produce my product or service? How much can I charge my customer? And then is there something left over at the end of the day? So understanding your relationship with credit really in your personal credit report really helps traditional lenders understand, you know, what the likelihood would be for you to be a good credit risk. And it doesn't matter whether you're gonna go apply for a Spark Capital One credit card, or whether you're gonna come to a bank like Norm and say, hey, I have a business that's been in business for a little while, or I'm getting ready to scale or grow, or I have an idea that I'm looking to, you know, get a small business loan for. You know, one of the first things that the banker's gonna ask you is, you know, what is your personal credit? Do you know? If you don't know, you need to go on to myfreecreditreport.com and go do that homework and get things cleaned up. It's a very hand-in-hand relationship. And I think the other thing that you mentioned is just so important, and I say this all the time to folks, is when you're thinking about your business, you're thinking about what it is that you do, but do you have a good insurance agent? Is there somebody that can help you underwrite and insure your risk, whether you have automobiles or whether you have employees in your business? There's risk associated with it. Do you have a good CPA or a good bookkeeper? Understanding how to get your QuickBooks set up correctly or your banking account set up correctly, knowing what it means when there's revenue coming in, expenses going out. And then oftentimes, you know, there's a lawyer, somebody to help you set up your S corporation or your LLC and keep all those papers in order. Yes, those folks often cost money to interact with. But if you're thinking about really having a legitimate business that has customers, those are things that are just really important. And I often joke that, you know, the banker and the insurance agent, you know, we don't typically charge you by the hour, but sometimes we'll get everyone together, the CPA, the attorney, the insurance agent, we'll people, let's all get on the call together, get the same room together to see if we can help this business owner navigate what is that next step. You know, if you own real estate, obviously that's very tangible, it's something you can see, you understand the value of having insurance in case there is some type of, you know, catastrophic hit. But oftentimes people don't think about it in the rest of their business, whether you're producing a product or you're, selling, having somebody speak here. There's liability that can be associated with somebody looking at that when you're in your salon. So thinking through all of those options. And then understanding, do I have good credit? What idea good risk? Whether it's to, and I can't tell you how many small businesses get started for somebody pulling a home equity line of credit. But again, how do you interact with your credit? Do you have good credit? And then if you did borrow that from your own personal resources, how does your business move along to pay yourself back?
Good question. And also, what Jameson said, which is like spot on, it's like, I don't know, I paid off my student loans, paid off my house, then, I don't know, credit reporting agencies thought I got it, or something. Because I didn't have any credit. That's fixed now, but the real question is, on the like grant seeking, like loan applications, all this other stuff. It feels like a lot of the time, the organizations are looking for people that are good at writing applications and good at filling out grant paperwork. And most of the time, that's not valuable to the business or the community or your customers at all. So like, where do we get help from people that are like, I see the value in your business and I love to write grants and financial applications, and I can make that happen, because like me as a founder, I don't want to have a 10-year job applying to grants. That's not what I should be doing. So how do I get over the hump of like, need to do that once or twice, right?
Yeah, good question. So let's in that and also take David's question, because he's had his hand up for a bit, and then we'll answer both. Davis, you wanna go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So some of this is maybe about speaking to personal experience. We've gotten a couple different sources of funding for our business. We've asked family and friends. We've gotten a couple of grants from the state, and kind of used them strategically at different points for growth. And I think some of my questions are more associated with traditional SBA funding for growing our business, and what kind of capital expenses might best fit under the envelope of a traditional SBA loan, whether it's like a new location or big equipment or working capital, which are three of the big capital expenses we're looking at in our business growth trajectory. I can speak more to some of those experiences if you have questions about them specifically, but it seems like we've kind of moved beyond that.
To Davis's question, the grant piece, I don't know if you can speak to it, Joe, but what I would say from my perspective is that grant funding is an art. There's not lots and lots of grant funding out there, so if your underlying assumption is I'm going to grow my business by grants, it could be just an exercise in futility, because now, however, if you get something that's special, something that's unique, if you're familiar with MTI and yourself if you're in the technology space, MTI does work in that area, and they do have folks there that can be helpful. I don't know if SCORE has a grant writing expert or not. I can't remember.
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I can look for a director.
Yeah, I mean, using your resources, and that's why I always say, so SCORE is probably the most, the primary sort of folks, the SBDC through USM, DECD, and there's the alphabet soup of organizations in Maine, and part of that's in the deck that you can get, that you can find subject matter experts to help you dive in and find them. I think it is particularly challenging in that grant arena, because usually there's some type of string attached, job creation, matching funds. So if you get a grant for 20,000, you need to have 20,000 to put in as well. And then there's usually some type of benchmark that goes along with it. Maybe a grant piece or the blending piece.
Yeah, I guess I would say like, there are people that you can hire to write grants for you who are very good at it, and that costs money. So it's a question of, do you want to build the skill? Because this is like one of those like sort of, it's never going to be a core skill for you as a founder, but just like your finances, like you need to be able to be person in it, and also you may need to be the one to write the grant in the early days. So it's one of those things where it could feel like eating glass, but it may be something that you by necessity need to spend time on. But it does suggest that you should make sure that the grant, the right size of the grant to be worth the time, i.e. $50,000 grant versus a $5,000 grant, and making sure that it's aligned with your business. And that just takes a little bit of research, but unfortunately, it's not a fun activity. But I would say that perhaps one of those necessary evils. And fundraising in general, to expand that to going to a bank and talking to Julie or coming to talk to me at the Adventure Fund. These are all things that, as a founder, are taking you away from running your business and feel like, hey, I just want to get this over with so I can get back to getting to work. And that's something that we're keenly aware of as well. We want you to be running your business, but at the same time, there's a lot of steps that go into getting capital. And by and large, it's generally scales with the amount of money you're getting. So if you're trying to get $2 million versus $2,000, you will need to spend a lot more time and have a lot more articulated plan than if you're getting $2,000. So that's an obvious statement, but a lot of what we do when people come to us too is to help them understand what that process is. Then they can either sign up for it or not. And we never push it on someone for whom it's not appropriate.
And I think that's a great segue to think about, traditional bank lending. And David, these are things that you'll find probably particularly interesting. Basically, in traditional financing, we're looking at some people call it 5 C's of credit, some people call it 3 C's of credit. I just try to keep it simple and call it the 3 C's of credit. It's cash flow, it's collateral, and it's capacity. So let's talk a little bit about cash flow. When a bank or a lending partner is looking to provide financing to you, they're saying, okay, let's take a look at your, in this case, if you have an existing business, we're going to collect the last 3 years of your tax return. We're going to collect 2023 profit and loss and balance sheet. And we might ask you for some projections and budget for 2024, kind of depending on what it is you're looking to borrow. If your business is brand new, we're going to ask you the last 3 years of your personal tax returns, any business that you own, and then we're going to ask for your business plan with your projections. Because as a startup, what we're trying to understand is, who are you? What is your business proposition, and projections and budgeting are the benchmarking to help us to sort of understand, does your business qualify for a loan? And the second one, or the third kind of piece is if you're looking to purchase a business, as you indicated. We're going to be looking for the last 3 years tax returns from the business that you're purchasing, your personal information, and then there may be some business plan or some projections that you need to do for that business that you're purchasing. There's so many times, and I'll stop with this and go back to traditional in a minute, but there's so many businesses that I've financed the purchase and sale of in the last couple of years. They're called fatigue sellers, so they're of retirement age. So the businesses may not have been as strong. When you think about sort of the financial kind of crisis that we've lived through the last 3 years, their performance may not be like it was in 2018 or 2019. So what the bank is trying to do is assess the cash flow. Your business has revenue, it has expenses, and then there's that bottom line, that net profit. We would add back things like depreciation, amortization, if there's any interest. And then in some cases, there may be some one-time adjustments maybe be made. So we're trying to understand what's available for cash flow to service this loan that you're looking to take out. Maybe it's a loan to buy a building, maybe it's a loan for a piece of equipment, or maybe it's a line of credit. Because again, if your business is one of those businesses that you provide a product or service to your customer, and then you have to wait 2 weeks, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days to receive payment, then a line of credit is something that you might need to kind of smooth out those cash flows or to get through some type of seasonality. So, understanding what the financials are of the business gives the bank a little bit of perspective to say, does it look like this business historically, year to date, and then sort of on a projected basis, does it look like it can afford the financing? That's sort of the first step, that's cash flow. Show you the question?
Yeah, on the cash flow front, you mentioned 3 years of like a look back period. What's is that sort of the inflection point where bank will collateralize against the cash flow and the assets of the business versus the personal assets of, you know, the officers of the business? Like, is that a hard and fast rule? Like, I guess, how does that work?
Well, that's the next C, collateral. So we've talked about cash flow, so if it looks like you and your business can afford to take out the loan, check, there's one piece of it. And part of that is making sure that the business owners have good credit. Most businesses in Maine are what we consider small businesses. So the relationship between the personal and the business, they're just completely intertwined. When they do the business cash flow, the personal cash flow, and you bring it back together with a global cash flow. And again, it's just kind of understanding where the inflows and the outflows personally and for the business. The collateral side is the bank is looking to say, okay, what is it that you're purchasing? Are you buying a building? Are you buying some equipment? Or do you need a line of credit? And I can't tell you how many times in my practice of the last 20-something years in this city, someone comes to me with a cash-based business and says, I need a line of credit. Well, what is it that you need funding for? Well, in reality, they're buying some equipment, they have a marketing budget, they have seasonality, they have real sort of what we call capital expenditures to make, not working capital expenditures. So trying to understand what the needs are and then how do we collateralize it. So it's probably very simple. If you're purchasing a building or equipment, you know, typically there's value in the building. There's value in, say, the truck or the cars or the CNC machines, whatever it is that your business needs to operate. And typically we would use those items to collateralize. Just if you purchased a car, you know, you sign the title, you sign the note, and for some reason you didn't make those payments on the car, the bank could come and take the car. Same thing if you purchased a home, you sign a mortgage. If you're not making those payments on mortgage, again, the bank would foreclose, and the same thing if you're purchasing a business, a building. Other business assets could include things like your accounts receivable, your inventory, if you're a business that builds inventory, and those are the things that we typically look at for traditional collateral. Now, in some businesses, they don't have traditional collateral, or maybe in a situation where you're buying a business, there's a lot of goodwill. You're buying company XYZ that everyone, oh yeah, I know so-and-so. Well, that isn't something that they can feel or touch. That's an intangible. That's goodwill. And it's not hard and fast collateral. And that's oftentimes when Dave's asked about the SBA, that's oftentimes when traditional financial institutions will look to what's called agency guarantees to provide sort of that extra piece to say, okay, we've seen the collateral, we understand who the guarantors are, the cash flow looks like it's good. But really, if something happened here today and this business failed or this owner couldn't make good, when we liquidate all the stuff, there wouldn't be enough for the bank to get paid back. So those agency guarantees from like the Finance Authority of Maine and the SBA are sort of that piece that helps the bank sort of check the box. So the SBA doesn't provide direct lending, but they provide a guaranteed product to the bank. And right now, loans that are $1 million or less, there's no fees for the borrower. So SBA lending is more relevant today than it ever used to be. So what I say to folks is that loans don't get declined for lack of collateral, because we have services like the SBA, Small Business Administration, or the Finance Authority of Maine can help us. But where loans may get turned down is for insufficient cash flow or credit of the individual, or the last piece that I'll talk about is capacity. And the story that I usually tell when I try to explain capacity is, there's a gentleman that I was speaking to a couple of years ago who had been a truck driver for 20 years, driven trucks and a successful truck driving career, and decided he wanted to buy the convenience store where he stopped every single day to buy his coffee on his route. And it was this kind of stress business. It was fatigued sellers who were retiring, cash flows weren't great, but this gentleman, you know, he sort of had a plan and some projections, and he thought that he could pull it off. Talking to him and understanding what his experience was, he'd never worked in a convenience store. He didn't know the first thing about making a pizza. He had no idea what it took to sort of manage the inventory of a gas station just from gas tanks and the environmental risk. And quite frankly, I turned the loan down for those reasons. You know, the business had some weak cash flows that maybe the SBA might have helped, but he had absolutely no industry experience or knowledge or know-how. And explaining to him, you're going to invest 20% down in the business, from your life savings and your retirement to purchase a business with which you have no experience in. Just on good faith, that doesn't make a good loan to me. Another bank did the deal, because they kind of said, okay, we've got this box to check and that box to check. And about 9 or 10 months later, the business failed. And a customer of mine in that industry went and bought that one, and yeah, I financed that transaction, because they already own 3 or 4 other convenience stores. And it's kind of heartbreaking when you think about, that was a loan that, maybe certain pieces of the financial puzzle made sense. But having the capacity, having management experience, understanding the industry, I just can't say enough about it. So when you're talking to a traditional lender, when you're thinking about starting a business, making sure that you're comfortable in the space that you're doing, that you have access to resources, that you have mentors to work with. It's one of those kind of ambiguous 3 C's of credit, but it's just super, super important. Do you have a question? Sure.
No, I just had like add on. Pretty much, you're gonna be an entrepreneur, it seems so far. If you're not the value without the money to the business, then there's no point of attempting it. That's what I'd say. So if you're gonna do a IT thing, you only took IT 1 or whatever, probably not gonna expand too well. Or you gotta be I use a lot of analogical things, you gotta be the leader without the power, you gotta be the father without the kid yet. So you set up, it's pretend it's like Planned Parenthood at the end, this is like, if you're gonna have the baby, make sure the baby's gonna grow next. That's the way I look at it. So if you're gonna go in and work for pennies on the dollar to grow a business, you gotta, 1, have a passion for it. 2, that you're valuable to that scenario, right? So no one else is gonna grow it for you other than you. So you're kind of on a lonely island at that point. And you're gonna have to deal with the mental struggles of it probably by yourself. So if you're not willing to handle that aspect, you're just attempting entrepreneurs. But if you keep going at it, you will be.
Yeah, and I think sometimes there are some businesses, and I've seen this, I've been at this particular bank for over 20 years, and I've seen some really, really cool ideas and plans, and there was one that I recently said, no, thank you, I'll pass on for a number of reasons. One of them is sort of my famous one, well, there isn't any one of these, this business doesn't exist in Greater Portland today. Really? Tell me. Just because you have this interesting idea does not necessarily mean that customers are going to be willing to pay for that product, that service, that experience, whatever it is. And if you're coming to seek traditional lending or gap financing or investors or friends or family or however it is you're putting together your pool of money to start your business, just jumping off because, hey, I have this really cool thought, can be a pretty big risk. Unless you can do kind of like Joe suggested starting off, can you start small? Can you have a following? Can you develop some type of, whether it's a social media campaign, whatever it is, so that there's recognition, there's name there. You can throw a rock probably from the sidewalk here of a number of businesses that, have started and been very successful. But they didn't necessarily, look to borrow a whole bunch of money from friends and family or leverage their home, their credit cards, or sought traditional financing. As you sometimes explain, it's a lot of sometimes watching that checkbook closely, checking out customer by customer, but getting to the point like Davis suggesting, he sounds like you've had a little bit of experience with some grants, you've grown organically, and then sometimes the question is, okay, I do need to buy a piece of equipment, or I need to spend money on something that isn't what's in my checkbook today. And then, a traditional loan might be a great idea. When you talk to your CPA or your bookkeeper, as your business starts to grow and get profitable, sometimes you need deductions on your tax return to kind of make all your tax planning make sense. So if you're purchasing things like buildings and equipment and vehicles, that's typically a very common reason to seek financing. Starting a business, seeking financing right out of the gate can be a little bit tricky, and I can't tell you how many times I've said in my career, don't quit your day job, stick with what you're doing, and then you do this on the side, so you can demonstrate that you've got something that makes sense, because whether you're taking out a bank loan or, maxing out a credit card or pulling from your 401k, before you make that sort of financial investment, you might wanna try to kind of pull together. But did that kind of answer your question in terms of collateral and banks are looking to make sure, like I said, that it looks like your business and you have enough kind of wherewithal to make your payments, or did your projections and your budget show it? But yes, usually there's some type of collateral, and in small business lending, typically, your S corporation, your LLC would be the borrower. But you as the owner will also provide your personal guarantee. That's just a pretty standard structure in small business lending. And in Maine, small business lending pretty much is a business that's probably $10 to $15 million in gross revenue a day. And that's most small businesses.
Yeah, I think that story that Julie told is helpful, obviously to illustrate what capacity means, but also you notice that person, went to someone who did give them a loan and that didn't work out well for them. And I think when you think about the universe of where you can get capital, right, there's lots of stuff online about different loans that you can take on. And some of it is a little less transparent than maybe would be the case if you sat down with Julie in her office or a local banker and said, explain this to me, explain what I need to provide to you, but also what my obligations are, what happens if I don't pay. And I think that's not to fear monger, but I think you really need to be thoughtful about what are you taking on when you take on a loan. And it's different when you take on a commercial loan for your business than it is when you take on a loan, personal loan, or open a checking account at a bank, right? That's just sort of, it's different. There's a lot more layers to sort of the relationship with the bank when you're starting out on this journey. And so sometimes we get the question of, hey, should I bank with Bank of America or should I bank with Forum Savings Bank or Saco Biddeford or whomever else is around the corner? And there's not really a wrong answer to that, but by and large, I think you're starting to notice there's, when you're taking on capital for your business, there's a lot of complexity to it. So it does generally stand you in good stead to develop a relationship with your banker, develop a relationship with your attorney and the team that Julie talked about earlier, which is a lot more involved than, again, if you were just opening a checking account. But it helps you understand what you're getting yourself into. And in some cases, in a lot of cases, it may not be appropriate for you to take that loan. And if the loan is, an online loan for 25% interest, you don't understand the implications of that for your business. There will be lenders who will still make that loan to you, and then you will spend, a lot of heartache trying to figure out how to get out from underneath that. So again, not to be sort of too negative, but I think it's one of the benefits of being able to sit down across the table with a person that you're dealing with, whether you're taking debt or equity or even doing a grant for that matter, to really understand what you're signing up for. Just a PSA, I guess.
And it's huge. I mean, I'm working, one of the lenders who works on my team is talking to a Portland business owner who had some issues. They processed credit cards, and the credit card company provided them those $25,000 for, we'll give you an advance with your credit card receipts. Oh my goodness, the interest rates, the fees, just heartbreaking what it's done to this business. And they didn't have a relationship with a banker, they didn't have a mentor at school, they didn't have anybody to sort of talk to, understand what that meant. And at this point, there isn't a lot I can do to unwind this. We're kind of plugging them in, some other resources, talking to the folks at Greater Portland Council. I'm hoping Greater Portland Council of Government and the City of Portland, because the City of Portland based, may be able to come together and refinance this kind of predatory type loan that they took from their credit card processor and put it into payments that they can actually afford and hopefully kind of pull things together. And I know this world is a lot of based in hey, this will solve my problem. But in business, whether it's attorney, banking, marketing, just there's so many aspects. They're trying to, developing some relationships, getting to know folks, coming to an event like this, to network with other business owners. Hey, what have you done? Hey, so hugely important.
This is kind of this side, but I think I have experience in that, so. The whole point is taking all the stuff we care about, raising those flags, in those agreements, and we can walk away.
Yeah, these are legally binding documents, especially when, the collateral is your home. These are real implications. So just as a quick time check, it's approaching 1:15. I think, obviously we keep taking questions and, we'll shoot for maybe another 15 minutes, if that works. Provided there are questions.
So for you on the equity side, are you, given that a large majority of businesses in Maine are small businesses, $10 to $15 million in gross revenue, and maybe 10-12% profit margins, like, what does the equity landscape look like in Maine as compared to like Boston, for instance, where it's like Summit Partners, like Tiger Global, Sequoia, et cetera? Like, what does the Maine equity environment look like? What sort of companies are you trying to invest in?
Yeah. It's much smaller. So my organization is called Maine Venture Fund, which is actually a part of the state of Maine. And Maine set up its own state-run fund because there were not many private funds in the state. So if you were a company 25 years ago raising capital, you would need to go to Boston and do the roadshow down there for equity. I think that's still the case. There's no doubt that there are a lot of investors outside of Maine that you can and should go talk to, but the state thought that it would be important for there to be some sort of capital here, and the structure under which we operate, which is not super relevant, so I won't get into the weeds, but it's an evergreen structure. So if we get a return from a company that has a successful outcome, gets recycled back into the fund and then invested in other Maine companies. And so it just exists in perpetuity, which is really meant for the benefit of Maine people. So you're a Maine tax-paying person, this is a positive thing, and these companies are creating positive impacts on employment and other economic benefits of Maine. So that's how we're a little bit different, but by and large, there are fewer companies and there are fewer investors in Maine, so it's a small community. We sort of find each other, and oftentimes companies in which we invest are also talking to that investor in Boston, and we're investing alongside them. Let's say it's a $2 million round, we write a $100,000 check, and someone else writes a $500,000 check, and there's a few individuals in there. So equity rounds tend to be pretty complicated in terms of the number of players around the table. There's a lot of herding cats. But every once in a while, there's a Maine company that raises, $20 million out of the blue from the West Coast of DC, and that's great, but it doesn't happen too often. And those investors sitting in New York are, there's so many startups that they tend not to look up at Maine because they're so focused on just the incoming, interest. And so it's both a blessing and a curse, I think, to be up here. But I don't think it necessarily makes it, especially post-COVID, where people are a lot more digital. I don't think there's any penalty to being here. And I think in a lot of cases for the companies that we're working with, from a capital standpoint, town, I think, is harder, right? Like, it's harder for me to hire a team, have them in a physical building here. If I need, very specific types of backgrounds, but that's also a trade-off too, because now I can hire someone to sit remotely, in Pittsburgh and work with my main company, which I couldn't do 4 years ago. So, all to say, there are trade-offs, but ultimately there's equity available in Maine. Small market, but it's a market.
I think there's a really interesting support network of entrepreneurs. So whether it's something like a green lighting or we have something called Launchpad, these are like programs that you can get involved with, you can get mentoring, education, and then you end up pitching for prizes. Maybe the prize is 25,000 or 50,000, but there's real opportunity to develop a cohort, to get connected with entrepreneurs in this main space. What are they doing? What are they up to? The SBA has a program, actually, I gotta be a girl out here tomorrow, their Thrive or Emerging Leaders program. And again, they bring together these folks, these businesses in Maine that are just doing really, really cool things. And they get to work together, to learn together, to pitch together, you know, to really kind of get connected. And it's amazing how in these cohorts, folks actually end up doing business together or connecting their different resources to one another. It's just growing and developing a business in Maine. We might be the other end of the map. But there's some really great talent that is in our area and a really big network of people that, because I think we're in such close proximity to one another. There's some great connections and, you know, $50,000 may not be everything to each business, but I think about this particular customer that, you know, they've gone and gotten some funding from a main venture. Maybe they've won a launch pad, maybe they've done a green light lead. You kind of put together all these pieces of piles of money and it gets you to the next benchmark, to the next piece. And sometimes they don't have lots of employees, but they have a really interesting or innovative product or service that isn't up there.
Yeah, I think community, you know, the tighter communities in Maine, from a funding standpoint, sometimes mean that there is some hyper local funding opportunities. So if I was a bakery and I wanted to locate on First of Main in downtown Lisbon, wherever, you know, that there may be something in the town that provides either, you know, some subsidized space or a grant. In Portland here, there's the Portland Chamber of Commerce, Council of Governments, rather, Chamber of Council of Governments. But there are Portland entities that are looking for businesses that are here to write small grants and to look all over the state. So just because I guess wherever you are, I think, especially if you are a business that has impacts locally, think about the sources of funding. Is there an economic development group, either a chamber of commerce or the council of governments, that is in your sphere that you can go talk to? You may not know anything about how they work, but you know, give them a call or go sit down and learn. And they would probably, you know, this is often a game of like, you know, sort of chase the lead. You know, you go in one door and, you know, you come to me and I'll say, actually, it sounds like what we need is a loan. And so I'll pass you on to Julie and she might say, actually, what you need is here, it's a loan, but it's a different type of loan. Yeah. So, you know, there's just a process there that you sort of have to follow, which might be a windy road, but you gotta get it. That's part of it. You know, the point made about entrepreneurship and getting yourself out there and knocking on doors.
And I think in the stuff somewhere, I'm not sure where you will find it, if you watch some of it, there is a nice slide that we kind of put together that gives you some links, places to click and places to search.
If you have a moment, I have a written question from Eric. I think it's working on. So he said, after doing an SBA lender search and calling the banks on the list, asking if they funded startups, he found that almost all of them do not fund startups at all. How do you overcome this challenge?
One of the questions that drives me crazy is when people say there's no access to capital, and I tell you that's not right. But typically, banks fund startups. I do them, but it's really in what is your ask? How much are you asking to borrow? Do you have collateral? Do you have a business plan? Do you have capacity? And what does your business plan look like? And I think it is, no business is the same. No funding opportunity is also the same. So, you know, folks, there's a very common misconception that there's free money and no money down. And that's just not how businesses are funded. That's just not how, you know, there may be a program where you can go buy a home for very little down, first time buyers program. But buying a home is very different than funding and starting a business. So what I say to people is in the SBA lender match, I review every single SBA lender match that comes to my institution. And there are some, and I look at, and I just say, no, thank you. Because again, you look at what's coming through the information and people's expectations for what their thoughts are just completely different than what traditional lending, bricks and mortar lending looks at. And then there's another group that'll come through and be like, you know, I see something here. We'll catch it, we'll pull it. We actually make phone calls. The national lenders will call you and chase you. There aren't a lot of banks in this part, at least in the greater Portland area, that fall behind those as the other managers. And then there's others that, you know, maybe there's not something here, but again, I want to have that conversation. I want to talk to folks. I want to know, do they have a score mentor? Where do they bank? Do they process credit? You're kind of understanding the whole banking system to it. But starting and funding a startup it's a very complicated process. And like I said earlier, just because you have an idea does not mean that it's actually financeable. I was working on one, and I've been working on one for probably the last 6 or 8 months with a particular individual who's looking to start a business here in Portland. And their initial ask was huge. And again, not this particular bakery that I was talking to, but it's like, you know, getting the business plan, digging into it, having a conversation and saying, okay, well, you know, have you tested this? Do you have any customers? Have you thought about, you know, if you borrow this amount of money and tomorrow and 30 days from now and 60 days, you have to start making loan payments. You don't have any demonstrated track record of revenue, and now your monthly payment is $4,500. Convincing a bank to lend into that is super tricky. Or credit scores aren't great, or they don't have personal savings or personal fallback. And I mean, I don't mean to sound disingenuous or any way, you know, sort of flip, but when I say don't quit your day job, it's about being prepared to come to a lending institution or come into the Greater Portland Council of Governments or going to CEI, for being prepared to show that you as an entrepreneur have a business plan that is well vetted, that you personally have prepared financially to be able to have some savings, have some fallback. I had a loan request last week that the person had $900 to their name, and they were looking to borrow about $150,000 to launch a business that didn't exist anywhere in Southern Maine, and thought that somehow that was a great idea to borrow that much money. It's really, you know, and like I said, I get really passionate when people say there's no access to capital. There's access to capital. But what banks are trying to do, and traditional lending is trying to do, is make sure that the loan you take out, your business and you can actually afford to repay. Good question?
This is a very specific question. I need to hire a part-time or full-time admin to help me. And to do that, talking with our HR, I feel I need 9 to 12 months of runway for that person to ask them to leave whatever they're doing currently and just work for me 40 hours a week, do nothing else. I don't have $75,000+ to say I can pay you for 9 months, and that is the one thing that I want. And how do I get that done?
Great question. How long have your business been in business?
6 months.
Yeah.
5 months.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a very, very tough ask. So, and then what we would do is start to break that into chunks. If you need to borrow, you need 60,000, because that's easier if you think about 6 months. Quick math. You know, if you need to borrow $60,000 and you've been in business for 6 months, you know, has there been $10,000 a month in, say, profitability, excess cash flow? Have you demonstrated in the last 6 months that, you know, you would have some excess cash flow to be able to pay this person without sort of looking at that lending? And many times in that first 6 months, businesses aren't really sort of cash positive. So it's a little kind of, you know, tricky in that area. So what you're looking to do is to try to project, say, you know, this is where my 6 month track record is. These are my projections for the next 6 months, and then the next 12 months, that next year. And salaries are working capital. So it's really looking into, say, a traditional line of credit to say, you know, my business kicks off $5,000 a month in excess cash flow. Geez, I don't, you know, what does a line of credit look like? If I pull down a line of credit, I don't pay interest only payments each month. But, you know, being able to show that your revenue can support having staff, and that's sort of that kickoff piece. And I've seen a lot of folks be able to, you know, whether it's not always the best advice, but sometimes like their home equity, it's their 401k, and they're pulling in personal resources to kind of plug that sort of short-term gap. But when you're thinking about funding those working capital expenses, payroll, inventory, sort of the things you can't just maybe touch and do, what you're asking the bank for is a line of credit. And does it look like sort of those monthly revenues from your customers coming in and support those interest only payments to sort of get you from point A to point B? And, you know, oftentimes that's just, that's an ask that for you as a business owner is a risk that maybe you may or may not be willing. But even for that individual who's considering coming to work with you, it is a pretty big risk to go to work for somebody who's only been in business for 6 months and, you know, can they afford my salary? And oftentimes what I have seen other folks do is that's when they look to maybe it's a contract. You know, maybe they call them fractional CEOs or fractional marketing people. You know, if you're paying somebody maybe $1,000 a month to get some of that work because, you know, monthly cash flow doesn't support taking on those employees or that payroll. Because payroll is one of those expenses, right? That's overhead, and that's working capital. So trying to navigate where the money's coming in, when the money's going out. Yeah, that's a tough one, because that's working capital.
Yeah, and I just add, you know, for pre-revenue companies, what we see sometimes is people looking for options, right? If this is a company that's gonna be a venture-backed company, and so, you know, you can find someone who's willing to take small or no salary in lieu of options. That's.
Can't do that with employees, so.
That.
Can't do that with employees. Right.
Yeah, there's some.
Maybe some other services like marketing or HR, you can find, and there's some amazing resources and businesses in this community that you can find contract-based.
Yeah, we're doing that.
Yeah.
We got like 3 to 6 months for paper contracting, but I'm specifically looking for, I need 9 months of runway to be able to hire somebody as a full-time accountability partner, make sure the calendar gets managed, make sure all this paperwork happens. And it's like, that's the one thing that's following right now.
And maybe it's a part, maybe, you know, we talk about these things in terms of venture capital investors, maybe there's somebody, and sometimes in that stage, you might find somebody who maybe isn't ready to start their own business, but maybe they're willing to contribute something to help get that rolling. But what you're looking for is sort of like it's a line of credit. If you're trying to support those working capital needs, and you know, typically what the banks are looking for in those areas, it is you know, cash flow, collateral, what your projections, where have you been? If your business is based here in the city of Portland or some of the other cities in town, I mean, there are some job creation grants that come around. I don't know, I think the city staff is supposed to land after the holidays, but I'm not positive.
They only had one meeting they're gonna do it then, and I had a conflict, it just got kicked out of that, so.
Yeah, sometimes it's just that creativity to find access to those, and you know, sometimes it was like only a $10,000 or $20,000 match, but yeah, I mean, that can be very impactful cash when you're trying to get it rolling.
So it's 1:30. Any last burning questions, from the group?
I was hoping to ask you guys a couple questions privately, just, it won't take that much of your time, I just kind of want to go aspect of something.
Yeah, I unfortunately need to jump, maybe, you can certainly grab my email address and give us some time. I don't know what your availability is, but I apologize, really, anything else from the folks on the call? Thanks for joining, appreciate it. Anything else from you?
No, just a big thanks to you guys. Thanks everybody for coming today. I'll send a copy of this recording out as well as the slides once we wrangle those. And there'll probably be a brief survey going out about this event, but we appreciate it if you set up time to do that. not mandatory, but we'd love it if you do that. As Joe said earlier, SwarmAid offers free confidential one-on-one mentoring, whether you're starting a business, or you're growing your business, whether you've never been in business before. We'll see what we can do for you. You can make that happen by going to SWORD.org. That's our national website. There'll be a button on that page that says find a mentor. Click that, fill in your zip code. That just tells us your name, and then fill out a short form, and usually hear back from us in about 2 to 3 business days. If you don't hear back in 2 weeks, you can give the office a call. We'll figure it out. We did briefly mention like mentors that have grant funding experience. I did manage to find 2 people, so if you are interested in that. We have Victoria Flynn and Tom Moore. I've met Tom, I have not met Victoria. And so that is something you're looking for. Feel free to ask me for those names, and you can stick that in on the form and be like, hey, I'm looking for Victoria because I heard she does grant funding. I want to learn or has experience with that. I want to learn. But that's all we got. Thanks to Long Saving Bank as well for being the sponsor of today's webinar. And that's all we got.
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks for coming.
Yes.